Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I meant to talk about this, I don't know, maybe 2 videos ago. I'm going to add this to my journey series as well. But there's a condition in which a person just gives up. There's things that happen to people in life that are just too much for that person to bear. And they just check out and they're like dead inside. And they may live for another 40 years, but they're not really alive, right? They've given up on any real what anybody would call a life. They're disconnected. They go into a sort of a they're almost like a robot, some sort of an android type of. I mean, they're just not functioning anymore. They're totally withdrawn from life. They've been so traumatized. Sometimes it happens in their youth. Sometimes it happens. Something happens in their life, and they just can't take it. Like, just can't take this horrible thing that's happened. It's just too much. They just check out. And many of us have experienced that. We have something happen to us, some kind of event. We go through some difficult situation in our life, and we just check out. Like I did in my first marriage, maybe for like 2 years. There was just, I don't know there was a series of events that happened where I realized that I was completely effed, that the family was kind of screwed, and it just didn't appear that anything was going to ever change, or there was no hope. It had to do with my ex, but just our circumstances as a family. There's a, kind of a defense mechanism people have, like they check out at work, right? I mean, it's just so painful. It's something they can't be conscious for. You can't be conscious for something, right? I mean, anything that you're going through that's painful. Like when I had to get a shot when I went to the doctor and knew something was going to be painful, I could just, withdraw from this, like almost just not go to sleep or something, but I'm going to go unconscious, right? To where I wouldn't physically feel it. I would just think about something else or whatever. That was temporarily, but it's a condition people have, like how to deal with pain and trauma and sadness and, a number of things. Somebody's yelling at you and you don't want to fight, like you're just, you don't want to engage with it, and you just withdraw. You just like go somewhere else. And, people can do that and just not come back up. Like I was talking about this in terms of like a spiritual condition, and it's a different thing. You can learn to do this where, that's how you deal with it. You just withdraw it to your spiritual condition, your spiritual side. And it's not really like an escape. And it's just, you're not attending to something that's so unpleasant, but you can come back out when when it's the right time, right? So it's two different things where, one where you just sort of go unconscious, and the other where you connect with your spiritual side. And, at some point, as you get older and you do this for a while, meditative state, you get into a meditative state. After a while, like the meditative state becomes so, I don't want to say just pleasurable, because pleasure isn't really, available in the spiritual sphere, but the feeling is so sublime that anything that you do in material life, there's a lot more excitement in material life. There's a lot more, lower level emotion, like pleasurable type of, excitement and, joy and things like this. The joys of their, physical being, the joys of your senses and whatever it might be. But, that joy is less subtle and less, peaceful than your spiritual state. And as you get older, you just more and more withdraw into the spiritual side. That's what should happen as people get older. And it becomes more, I don't want to say enticing, but better than the material life. But what I'm talking about here, in the beginning of the video, the beginning of the voiceover, is not that. Like, it's not that you're, it's more like you're going catatonic. You're not really connected to your spiritual self, and you're withdrawing from the world. It's like you're going to, some other, like, like almost like a dark place, more like a suspended animation. There's where your soul is. And if your soul is in a, a higher level of consciousness. Your soul is closer to God, or than the average person, or you're moving, into a like the spiritual approach part, which I talked about. How close you are to returning to the source. That's something different than when you just sort of check out. And the checking out can be that, like you can learn how to check out and just go into your spiritual self, because it's just, it doesn't have to be just about pain, of the pain of life. When you go inside to your spiritual self, you're a charge. When you check out, you're depleted. You're not connected to your body. You disassociate, but you're not connected to your soul either. And so you're just in this, like, limbo, whatever it is, and people's just life energy diminishes. They just don't have the same level of prana in their system, which is their creative force, their energy. And it's just, people have to develop this skill on how you deal with this kind of shock and trauma. People go into shock. People go into, they have these various states, PTSD and things that happen, right? This is what happens to people at war. So many people just die without dying on the battlefield, because, and not just the soldiers, the civilians, because you see shit in war and you live through stuff. And that's why people grow up in severe sexual abuse, trauma, situations, traumatic situations, a traumatic family. They just don't ever recover, especially if they didn't have anything that resembled a normal life. So they have just the crap that they grew up with. And everybody has that to some extent, because almost, nobody grows up in a good family. There's very few good families out there. Any divorce situation is a bad family. It's maybe, there's levels of it, right? There's better divorces, and some people have a little bit more money, and the kids still, have a pretty good, family, even though they're in a kind of a whatever, some kind of they're divided between two houses and whatever, which is always like tough on kids. But then, then there's remarrying and things like that, and blended family. The kids can have an okay, modern day type situation, but it isn't a real great family. Like, you grow up and it's a stable family, and there's, extended people, extended family members, grandparents that have value. What I'm talking about here is a good family is this. There's love in the family. There's love between the husband and the wife. Then they both are, they're strong people who can endure the difficulties of their life and not dump it on their kids, and not, saturate their kids with these, the problems. There isn't these disagreements. There aren't these, whatever, some kind of just a rift, like some kind of a schism between the husband and the wife, that the kids are aware of, like any kind of, conflict they have, any kind of, issues they have to be able to prevent the kids from experiencing that. But the kids are going to know either way, right? So there has to be some love, and the parents have to like each other, and they need to have some sort of shared goals and beliefs. They have to be religious, or they have to have something, some kind of spiritual connection where they have, some sense of morals and ethics that the kids live and learn, and, they get to see their parents embody that. And then you have to have parents, grandparents that, extended family that is part of the life, that offers, other things, that the parents can't. And the parents feel supported by it's great if both in-laws are great, right? And so there's love, coming from every direction. And the kids are, everyone has enough energy and prana, and they're not, there's not like depression and psychological issues with the family members that the kids get caught up in. And the kids should just be kids. They can live a normal life as kids, and they grow up, developing a sense of, they learn through play and through their, like just observation of the family, and everybody's psychologically healthy. Like they used to be like in, say, a village, and there's just normal type of things that happen when people die and loved ones and people are sad. There's just a healthy way of dealing with it, right? That people can cope with their, the traumas and difficulties of life. And that's just very rare, right? Like you just, kids don't have that in the Western world, and people spend quality time with their family and not, being raised by the internet and by all the, they're getting exposed to things like pornography when they're 6, 7, 8 years old, and not finding things, that are disturbing, violent things, video games, all the stuff that kids, endure now. So even if you have great parents, the internet fucks these kids over and, messes them up, right? And so, with people not having quality families, and then they don't know how to be good spouses themselves, right? And oftentimes, you represent a need as a kid that your family couldn't fulfill. Like you have to step into a role as like an adult role because there's a lack of that with the parents, right? And so, the kids just don't have a proper family experience. And so people have holes in their internal world. They have things that they didn't develop proper things. They didn't have things modeled for them by their families. And society has put shit in them, indoctrination in school, bullshit stuff, history, historical stuff, and, this idea of the American dream, a desire for fame, these things that are supposed to replace, good, wholesome things and, what a good, strong, healthy human being would have. And the desire for something that's, like some kind of pipe dream, the American dream, fame and fortune and power. And they need some of these things, victories, success, and whatever it is, right? Being competitive, whatever it might be, things that they need to feel good about themselves. Because like people aren't right, people are not, they're not, they haven't developed like what a normal, healthy human being would have. And certainly connection to God being at the center of that. And, connection to nature, and then, love within, a support system where people can, trust and have faith in other people. It just doesn't exist, right? So everybody has these holes and flaws that can be exploited and manipulated, and, then you get into like OCD, people needing control, or, any number of these different types of personality disorders and things that are out there. Narcissism, right? Narcissistic wounds. They have to tell themselves they're great because they've been told they're a piece of shit by everybody else in their lives, and nobody told them that they're worthwhile. Or it goes the other way where the parents live vicariously through them and they think they're better than they are because their parents have been telling them how great they are, and it's how wonderful they are and whatever, and they go out to the world and other people don't see it in them, right? What's natural, normal, and appropriate. And you have to have parents who see your issues and finds ways to strengthen you. Like they see weaknesses in you, they see things you need, and they give you tough love, and they they're aware and they're looking at you. And like most parents aren't able to look at their kids and see them, right, and see what they need. And there's just this lack of this stuff in our society. And then these people have delusions about themselves because their parents will just tell them whatever they want to hear and give them gifts, or put them on something, like a tablet or cell phone. Here, just do this. It's just, I mean, like as parents, when you have these downtimes, like you're driving a long distance with your kids, it's an 8-hour drive, and your kids can sit there and look out the window, and they're going to get restless and start teasing each other. Like they'll the older kids will tease whatever it is, right? Like the things kids get into, they get bored and they and then it's like they start fighting, and they're like a kid will used to parents will say, don't touch your sister, don't touch your brother, or whatever, and the older kid or the younger kid or whatever it is will put their finger really close to the kid, their sibling, and say, I'm not touching you. Like this kind of bullshit, right? What my brother would call grab ass, playing grab ass, like this, whatever it is. Kids wrestle around and, they, or whatever, they insult each other, like they just get shitty. And they're restless and bored, and you have to put on, we used to put on like stories, like, audiobooks or whatever it might be, things to, keep the kids from, just wrecking the trip, right? And as parents, you just have to come up with things. You can't give your kids 100% attention. At times, you stick your kid in front of the TV or whatever. But those are, there used to be things that were done. Like kids would learn skills and crafts, and they would have, this is something that I saw when we had the homestead, the kids would, like, milk the cow. Like, they would do shit that was, they would be controlling a half a ton, 1,500 pound animal or whatever it was. I have my videos up that, will probably forever remain private now that things of the family's turned out the way it is. But, I watched my kids learn things and do things, and there's a sense of accomplishment. And then they would have skills like knitting and, whatever. They'd learn to, play the fiddle or whatever it is, right? They have these things they would do, hobbies. Instead of watching TV or doing things, they were active, and they were, they did things that were, the same kind of condition you get in when you're watching TV or things like that. They read books, and there would be like a different level of, interaction. But the passivity and the lack of skill base, things that the kids can do, and the lack of the self-esteem that they get from contributing. When your kids start helping out with the survival of the family, and they're producing food, and they're cooking, and they're, they have all these skills, right? And then when they're getting married, they're already, I mean, how many kids leave the house and they know how to cook, right? They have some, just a basic need, knowledge of how to shop and cook. They're around their parents, but like you bring your kids shopping and you're just trying to distract the kid because they're, pain in the ass or whatever, right? And, my two, my first two kids that were Irish twins, they were very active. And I bring them into a store, and one would run one way and one would run the other, right? It was like fucking crazy. Just watching them in the store, like keeping them, together in these things, right? And so, like, they don't learn. They're there, but they're not learning. Like, how many things do you know, like, how to do, and your kids never learn those things? Like, you try to teach them, or there just isn't the time, or they're not interested. They don't want to hang out with their parents and learn these things. You're cooking meals. It was kind of a thing I wanted to do with my kids. I was going to show them all of my recipes and all the things I know how to do in cooking, so that they would be able to, do that, like, at a much earlier age than, it took me years and years to have the abilities I have in terms of cooking food. I just sort of fell into it. I absorbed information over the years. So I wanted my kids to be able to do that. Like, that's one of the basic things: how to shop, how to cook, knowing basic, things about nutrition. And, hopefully you can instill that in your kids, but kids don't want to listen to their parents, and they rebel against everything their parents stand for or whatever. They just want to do their own thing. And so they don't learn, right? And then as long as you're doing it for them, they're like, oh, that's just, it's your job to cook for them. They just feel entitled to it. They never think about, any of these things, right? And so there's a time where we were having my youngest two kids cook. They're old. They're in 20s, right? They were cooking one meal a week, and they got, they learned these meals, and there was only one of them that was kind of good. The rest kind of sucked. And it took and I offered to pay for them to go to some kind of like classes, like, the cooking classes, and, they just didn't take advantage of it, right? And then they're going to go out into the world, and they're going to have, limited knowledge about cooking and nutrition. And, I've tried to talk to them about it. They just didn't want to listen. They had their own whatever. So, I mean, it's a real tragedy. Like, they're going out without having that level of preparation. So I want to say this in some video. I'm glad I waited to do this. This is Sunday, February 16th, and I'll, make this video today. And, the whole rest of the video will hopefully fall in line with this. But I forget which video. It was a recent one. I wanted to include some of what I'm saying, but it would have been just something I added on. But now I would have said it would probably been about 10 minutes of, explanation. But this idea where people end up just checking out, right? So you have holes in your internal makeup, and you go out into the world, and then shit starts happening to you. Mostly bad stuff in terms of what I'm talking about. There's the good things, and maybe you don't learn how to enjoy the good things or appreciate the good people. You have people who are maybe healthier and would be better for you, but they're like foreign to you, right? Somebody who could be a good potential spouse, good friends, people who are positive, but that's not what you grew up with. So you're functioning people. There might be people who are just, better functioning, and like you just can't rise up to their level. They're like almost like aliens to you because they're more, developed human beings. And so you can't sustain any kind of relationship with them. So you find fucked up people like yourself, and then you have fucked up kids and you have fucked up life. And so, like this is, the tragedy of the American system. And there are these things that happen where people just give up. My brother was talking about in Vietnam. There's some people that he saw lots of his, people that he was soldiers, and then once he counseled, and they never recovered from something. They're still like whatever trauma happened to them. They're still in that trauma. They're still reliving it. They haven't been able to, absorb it and reconcile it and, move on to something else. And I've learned to be able to do that. Like I've had real bad news, real difficult things. The family, my situation with my ex, and all these things. And I was watching this, this is why I'm glad I waited. And I'm watching this show called Apple Cider Vinegar. It's this Australian girl, and I talked about this in my last video. And she faked a brain tumor, and it's a very complex, interesting story. But if anybody really was interested, I've talked about this in my Journey series about what it was like to be with my ex. Like this is the closest story I've ever seen. There's certainly differences, but this woman has very similar characteristics to my ex, and how the other people have to deal with it, and it's hard for them to see it. Like you're watching it, and you can see what a horrible person this person is as a viewer, but the other characters, because this was an adaptation of a real life story. There's some fictional aspects of it, but there's an element where they're trying to explain why they went along with it. Because they all kind of sensed she was faker and a liar, and they saw how she was using people. Like this woman, she has this manager who sort of left her friend, who was the other girl who was who had real cancer, but she's fucked up too. And the whole narrative of the story, which sucks, is they're trying to make alternative health all look like it's worthless, even though they kind of acknowledge that the chemotherapy and the other things don't work. It's still this element. There's all these guys who want their wives to go to a real doctor, but the real doctor has failed. Like this girl's mom gets anal cancer, and her grandmother got it, and her grandmother got chemo and died a miserable death. And so the mom doesn't want to get it, and her husband wants her to get the chemo and get the whole there's no they don't really fully show you how bad the medical stuff is, right? They sort of mention in a half a way some of the characters that the majority of oncologists wouldn't get chemotherapy. Like they kind of know it doesn't work and it just sucks, and they see what it does to people. So they just kind of condemn the alternative stuff. A lot of it's that. But either way, there's still this relationship, which is to me a very clear depiction of something that many of us have experienced. And it's much more insidious with women who are, in a way, abusive. Women who are manipulatively abusive. They're not physically abusive. They're not physically intimidating, but they're like so emotionally abusive and so manipulative. But they're really good at disguising it. And the thing that I saw is something that is very similar to what I went through with my ex. Is this character in the show? She comes on really strong to whoever she's trying to. Her manager says that she's using them like a host. She looks for hosts, like she's a parasite looking for a host. And she comes on really strong and like how great you are. And like really sees you. Like it has the ability to see some qualities in you, and, like some things that like you have, and, abilities you have. And she's going to use those abilities. She's going to exploit them for her own gain. But she really comes on like, wow, how great you are at this and how wonderful you are. And, overly, in a flirtatious way, whether it's, whatever that is. I mean, whether it's a sexual flirtation or just sort of, a professional flirtation or something. And these, women who are able to do this, men could do this as well, but it's more, women. And, it's a short-lived thing. It's a part of having a borderline personality disorder. And, a big part of it's covering over their evil. And so you see with people with borderline personalities believe deep down that they're evil. And so they want to, they don't want people to see that. And so they're able to create an illusionary world and in a very intense relationship where they'll tell you they love you like they first meet you, right? This kind of thing. It's this thing. Pete Davidson is an example of someone with a borderline personality. Like he's admitted he's had this. And, he has these relationships that last 3 months, right? And they're very intense because they start off where it might take years to get to that level. The borderline personality can go to that level like right off the bat initially. But then, whenever this girl in the show gets called on her bullshit, because she believes she has cancer. Like she has these things and she's done this her whole life. She faked a heart attack. She faked a cardiac arrest when she was 13 because she was being embarrassed by some, like she learned this thing from her mom and she's got this, what she does. And there's a histrionic aspect. There's a histrionic personality disorder where people need to be the center of attention. Like she has a birthday party for her son. And her husband's coming back and her husband's trying to deal with his dad who just had a stroke. And she's making her, and it's not her husband, it's this guy she's with. And the guy is, a better parent to her son than she is. And she needs him to come back, and he's dealing with his own crisis. But she's so narcissistic, and so, about everything's about her. And she is having a birthday party. And she has this kid, she's met this mom who has a kid who really has the brain cancer that she's telling everyone she has. And the kid has a seizure, and she says, I have a platform, and I'll raise money. And she's not going to give the kid the money because she stiffs everybody. She doesn't pay anybody. She just, she uses them for their work. The people designed her platform, whatever it might be. She's used all these people, and then she doesn't pay them, and then she throws them away after, like they're a host. And she knows she's going to do this GoFundMe thing, and she makes it about herself. She has all these pictures of her with this kid. And she has a GoFundMe, and she's raising money for this kid that she's going to take. And, the party's getting out of hand, and her manager's like seeing through her. And she kind of, can see everything's going south. And it's supposed to be a party for a kid. It's a big sort of extravagant party with lots of people and, things. And she just has a seizure for 40 minutes. She just fakes a fucking seizure. And, she has to be the center of attention, this histrionic aspect. Because many people have personality disorders. They have, the major personality disorder, the narcissistic personality disorder, the antisocial personality disorder, which is like the sociopath, and the borderline personality. But they might have like both of them. They might have a couple of them, and one of them's like a minor one. And this histrionic thing is very, people who need attention and will do outlandish things to get attention and tell these outlandish lies. But I was thinking about, like, when I was watching the thing, and I was thinking about all the ways that this affected my kids. She's having this, she brings this kid to this sort of, alternative doctor. And the guy seems okay, but, like, it's just, like, they kind of make him look a little bit shaky. But he says that the kid, she was having problems with her kid because her partner is gone. He's taking care of this dad. And she brings him to this doctor. And the doctor says that the kid's scared. He's scared that she's going to die. Because he's telling her when she has cancer, she fucking doesn't, right? And that it's really traumatizing him. It's really affecting him. And so she, like 5 days later, she's having this fucking seizure in front of him, faking a seizure. And everyone's kind of like, realizing like she's fucking faker, like her partner and her manager, and they confront her, and she just flips out. Like, and this is what happens. I remember this with my ex. Whenever she was faced with the truth, because she ends up believing her own lies, right? And then when like reality slaps her in the face and things that she's pretending didn't happen, and and things that she's doing that are faking, and all this stuff that. It's this illusionary world that she's created. And there's these people who end up so believing in their lies, when they get confronted with the truth, they just glitch out. Like they can't deal with it. It's like it's like the the Wicked Witch of the West, which then Dorothy pours water on her. Like they just melt. Like it's just they fall apart. Anyways, that's what's going on with me. All right, so I got some other things to cover here. And again, I'll include this with the Journey series. All right, so I want to add something to what I was saying. This is kind of important. So I went to eat breakfast. It's late today, 10 o'clock. It snowed. It was raining last night, and, our big pond fills up in the winter. And it's pretty full now, and by the spring, it's flooded. Like, it's just the whole thing around the thing, the banks have expanded. It takes as much water as it's no longer a pond. It becomes like a marsh because the land here is originally a marsh. There's all these places that are close to the coast that were marshlands, right? Anywhere that's close to the ocean needs to be able to absorb the extra water when the ocean, expands, like when there's some sort of a storm surge, right? We see this all the time. Louisiana, good example of this, where the areas, behind the levees are below sea level, and you're living in an area that's below sea level. And it's okay when the sea is, it's normal. It's where it is normally, but every once in a while the sea gets displaced and the water pours into these various boroughs in the Louisiana area, New Orleans and these other places. Where it was in Connecticut, there were marshlands, and, as you get closer to the ocean, there's lots of marshlands, and lots of life exists in these marshlands. And, where I live now, there's marshlands that were now farms and people's homes. And they dump a lot of dirt, and some of the places, end up being above the floodplain. And when I was in Chennai, India, when it flooded, that was the case. And so, the tendency is to flood. So we have this pond, we dug this hole, and the water goes there, and then, when that fills up, the rest of the place turns into a marsh, right? The water around our barn and things, and it's just these, it's like an area that for a couple days you can't access because everything's just soaked, right? But anyways, it's kind of a metaphor for what I'm going to say here. So I turn on the news, and there's a guy who's saying he saw a film of October 7th and how bad it is. It's on Fox News, because Fox is all, Rupert Murdoch is pro-Israel and very conservative. And they're the most sort of gung-ho about this stuff. And, it just clicked that I would add this to what I was saying. All right, in 2005, I realized that the official story of what happened in 2001, the big event, was bullshit. But the hard part about it was it took me 2 weeks to just absorb it. And I knew governments lie, and I knew media lied. I was well aware of these things, right? But the idea that the American government would attack its own people and create victim consciousness, because this is what we're talking about here, is that a government will attack its own people and do horrific things to its own people so it can claim victim consciousness to go start a war with other countries and beat the shit out of these people and take their land. And they had nothing to do with this event because it was self-inflicted, right? This idea of a false flag thing. And it's so hard to believe. I mean, when you're talking to sheeple about it, it's hard for them to believe. And regardless of the facts, regardless of, any of these things, there's a point where you just know it. Like, you just know. Somebody's a lying piece of shit. And you have to go through a whole, like, I can't believe somebody would fucking do that. Like, most people, no matter how fucked up you are, you would never do something like that. And you can't imagine someone else doing something like that. And this is what it was like dealing with my ex. You can see it in this show, Apple Cider Vinegar, with these people this woman gets to use. She uses this one guy who's a damage control guy, and she, of course, turns on him when something goes south. And he knows she's a lying piece of shit going into it, right? And he still falls for it. Like, he deals with people like that all the time. Because people are good at convincing you of something. And, some part of you is suspicious because like, deep down they're lying. But you can't really wrap your mind around why a person would be like that fucking evil, right? It's hard for people to imagine that. So when I realized that the official story behind the big event in 2001 was bullshit and we attacked ourselves, it looks like Israel helped, like, as I found out later, and to create this victim consciousness, it changes your whole view of, like, the American system and everything. And then a lot of people in the truth community just haven't gone through that. Don't really get it. They don't, they blame it on the deep state or some group, but it's the whole fucking thing, right? And so, Israel has long been a place, the Jewish, tradition about the Holocaust, using that as a victim consciousness thing, to get what they want, right? People who hurt themselves or pretend they're sick or, pretend they've been victimized or maximize when they have been victimized to extract things from other people, use it as a manipulative tool. There's this woman who is like some sort of, leader in the Jewish community, and she's in Europe or something, and they're talking to her about using victim consciousness, and she said, "Yeah, that's our secret weapon." It's something that, I mean, everybody does, and they have learned to do it really well, especially to do with the Holocaust. And of course, Trump is bringing that back up, right? And so, this idea that Hamas, I mean, it makes no sense that Hamas would be doing whatever they're doing, because every time they do something, it hurts the Palestinian people. The people that they're supposed to be a part of get hurt. And the goals of Israel are, every time Hamas does something, the goals of Israel to claim that land and intrude on that land, grab land grab, happens, right? Expand their country. Every time Hamas does something, they grab a little bit more land. And so it's hard to imagine that that's accidental, that Hamas is so stupid and so blinded by their hatred that they keep on hurting their own people. And the death count is so uneven. And when you don't have an army and you keep on picking a fight with people who clearly have stated and shown what they're about, and which is taking your land and stealing, killing your people and taking your land, and you keep on attacking them and then running behind your people and letting your people suffer, the only real logical explanation is that Hamas is working for Israel, because Israel's, like I said in my, my other video, right? And so, this idea that Israel would kill its own people, and whatever happened on October 7th, right? If that's, that's the narrative, it's hard for anybody to believe, right? But they went in and they bombed and they killed 20,000 Palestinian children, 40,000 Palestinian people, and the rest of the 1.7 million people are suffering. So they don't have any problem making those people suffer, and they want to kick them out of their country. When Trump said, "Let's get them out of the country," Netanyahu and them jumped on the opportunity. Yeah, let's get them out. Let's get them out of the country. They couldn't wait to do that. It's a part of their goal. They're wanting to take that land, right? They want that land to be theirs. There's no question. Any country would. If you could take more beachfront property, right? If America could grab, Cabo from Mexico or whatever it is, right? I mean, like we didn't not take Hawaii, right? We had the opportunity, or even Alaska with its resources. It's not whatever it is. Like there's, land. When people don't, say, "Oh, I don't want land," right? People always want land. But to think that people are so evil, like these countries would sacrifice their own citizens, would kill their own citizen, blow up buildings and, destroy things and kill their own citizens, kidnap them and, torture them and do things to their own citizens to create victim consciousness so that they can go then perpetrate evil against another people. It's hard to just wrap your mind around. Like that's your government. That's these governments. And that these countries would do it. Like the countries would release a biological weapon like COVID and, do all the things that they did to their own people that they're supposed to protect. And then, act like victims and, all these things that they do, be manipulative. But you see in this show, the Apple Cider Vinegar, somebody who does exactly these things. And the really, it's very disturbing that people would do shit like that. But people who do shit like that, in countries that do shit like that, always self-sabotage, right? They always fucking are, the truth is just there for you to see. Like, even if you can't prove the truth, you know it. Like, at some point, you just know it, you can see it. Some people can know it and see it. But they also piss people off. Like, this girl keeps on screwing people over, and she talks shit to this one girl. And so, she develops these enemies. And, self-sabotaging by creating ill will. And, she's got deals with Apple and, she's a multi-million, followers, millions of followers globally. And eventually people are going to figure out she doesn't have cancer. like it's inevitable. And you can see all the ways that she sabotages herself to make it happen with loved ones, with business associates, and other people. And you see this going on with Israel. You see it going on with Donald Trump in the United States, with Donald Trump faking, when he faked that he got an assassination attempt. It's just, you can see it, And those people who see it, it's just out there. You're holding the space, as they call it, in some liberal, new age, psychological, modern day liberal, psychological approach. You're holding the space. That's a way they talk, right? But like you're holding the space is like a real thing because you are aware that Donald Trump's a lying piece of shit that faked an assassination attempt to act like a victim so he could bolster his whatever. It's people who do shit like that. Eventually, the lies are exposed. They're frauds. These are fraudulent people. These are all people who are frauds. Frauds and fakers always expose themselves. They always are doing things to get caught, and oftentimes people don't pick up on it. But inevitably, every lie that's told eventually gets exposed. Every kind of manipulative, deceptive thing, especially now when we live in a time of truth. We're in truth or consequences. Like we've entered the. There was a show called Truth or Consequences, in some town in New Mexico, renamed itself after this show. It was like a game show. But this is where we're in that kind of period where the truth is coming out. There's no stopping it, right? There's people are seeing the truth. It's not just the internet. It's the divinity always wants to show its pristine, unvarnished essence. God always wants to show its the divinity within you, and the divinity in general always wants to display itself, its purest form. And everybody craves it. Everyone craves God's love in its purest form. And there's all these aberrations, all these, ways that people get, addicted to grosser forms of God's love, right? Everything stems from God's love, but there are just perversions of the actual essence, right? And everybody wants love, like everyone craves love on a heart level. And everyone craves the truth. Although, when the truth is so painful, then, the dark truth, right? And so there's so much painful truth out there of how shitty people are and how twisted people are and what they're willing to do in terms of their fucked up, their crazy shit that's going on inside of them. Their deviation, their depravity, what they're willing to do to hurt other people, to not like face the truth, right? Because a lot of this shit is about the cover up. A lot of this stuff is about not getting exposed and not admitting, yeah, I'm a lying piece of shit. It's so easy to do. Yeah, I'm a lying piece of shit. Oh, I'm a piece of shit. I, did this. I'm being manipulative, whatever. Like when people get caught. But how oftentimes when people get caught, they just say, yeah, you're right. You got me. They never. Like criminals, they never admit the crime, right? And some part of them is feeling like a victim and they always feel like a victim and they're justified in what they did. And yet they get caught, right? And they get suffered the consequences and they never own up to it. And these people and these, governments and these things, because they just can't admit the truth, right? They don't want to tell you, they don't want to admit what they are. And that's, when you admit what you are in terms of the negative side, then you can admit what you are as a soul. That, your ego's hijacked this, pristine part of you because you have the potential to be a good person. You have the potential to be, a divine essence, that you expressing the divine essence, the manifestation of the divine essence within you. And people are scared shitless of that even more than their twisted, fucked up person, their ego that is created, right? And they don't want you to see that, but they don't want you to see the divinity within them, and they don't want to see it. And so, like, that's how people, like, the civilization's so fucked up, right? Because people don't want to admit the dark side of themselves, and they really don't want to embrace the light. And so that's when I talk about meditation or connecting to God, people immediately turn off because they're scared of, their egos are scared of what's going to happen to them when they embrace the divinity within them. They'll lose control, and people want control. That's why I call the people the controllers. And so that's what this is all about. Anyways, let's get into the other stuff here. So the word for today, boys and girls, is fraud. I really want to focus on the word fraud, right? the thing is that people have goodness inside them, and they can, they can be lying pieces of shit, which everybody is to some extent. People lie, manipulate, right? But they actually have good things that they want for other people. They have. I mean, every person has, a soul. Every person has some qualities inside them, good qualities inside them. Even the worst people, and every saint, like every sinner, every, you know, person who's a criminal, sex offender, all these horrible people, right? The worst, the dregs of society have their moments in their lives, whatever it is, no matter what hell they grew up in, what life they have moments where, I mean, I saw this in the treatment centers with these horrible kids. These were the worst. These were kids who were, I have a master's degree in counseling. I worked in 2 different treatment centers, one where I was a counselor in the milieu before I got my master's degree, and one where I was a clinician. And these kids were, sex offenders, the dregs of society. And they would have, moments. Everyone have their moments. And every saint has their moment of doubt, right? Every spiritual person, in the Christian tradition, Jesus saying, Father, why hath thou forsaken me? Some doubt. And they have their moments. Jesus has his moments where they scrubbed. Every saint has their, moments of egoism, their low moments. People have these things. But then there's people who, who just create a fraudulent, and this is, everybody to some extent with the modern day social media, trying to present yourself in a better light. And that's what you would do naturally, right? Like, I'm not going to, get out here and just display my worst qualities and video it or put it on video, right? When I'm in a bad mood and, I'm feeling, whatever. Sorry for myself or something, right? People do that, but and when they do that, they do it in some self-serving way, right? And so people want to display themselves in their best light. And you see this with social media. People are their own publicists, or some people have actual, publicists that work for them to try to display them in their best possible light. And they're fraudulent. Like, it's just one massive fucking fraud. But then there are people who are politicians who pretend to be something they're not, right? And, it all surrounds this idea of, oh, Joe Biden has served Americans for 50 years. 50 years of service. It's all been about Joe. It hasn't been about serving Americans. Maybe once in a while he feels something for people and tries to help them. But, we know, right? We know it's bullshit. But, that's the official story. And the official story is Bill Gates is a philanthropist. Bill Gates made a lot of money screwing people over, creating a monopoly, doing evil shit in Microsoft, putting out an inferior product, spying on people, all the shit that Microsoft did. And then after he became the world's richest man, he all of a sudden wanted to help people. Like, it's bullshit, right? All these people, all these pharmaceutical companies, oh, we just want to help people. No, it's for profit. You want to make money on other people's suffering. And you want to be a good guy on top of it. You want to be seen as a good person. And all these leaders, it's about that. And so this is something that looks like a good deal, right? Let's watch this here.
Just at the highest level into the Indian market.
Yeah, let's go back.
This will bring safety in the Indo-Pacific. In addition, the United States and India will be working together like never before to confront the threat of radical Islamic terrorism, a threat all over the world, actually.
Okay, so there's a thing here. So you guys who've watched my Journey series know, there's Hindus and Muslims, and you guys probably know this. If you've seen the movie Gandhi. So when Gandhi was instrumental in getting the British out of India, which is a good thing for India. The British were, controlling India in an abusive way. They colonized India. And Gandhi got the British out of the country, and the British said the reason they were staying there is because they had so incited division between, they didn't say this, but what they said is they were preventing the Muslims and the Hindus from going at each other, right? The Muslims and the Hindus from just horrible stuff that they would end up doing. It was brutal. Because it was in every city you had these two groups of people and citizens, and they turned into mobs. And when the English left, the English had so provoked the divisions between these two groups. There was Muslim Indians in the north, and and there was Hindu Indians in the south. In the majority of India, and so the hatred between these two groups was so brutal that they created Pakistan. So Pakistan was part of India, and then it became its own country that was Muslim. And there's a lot of Pakistani people that end up going to England, and then there was the Hindu people in the which is now India, and there's still some there are still some Muslims in India, but they're fairly tolerated, right? But it was brutal, and this guy Modi, you know, so in our Sajmarg meditation, there's supposed to be no recognition of castes, any kind of prejudice, and any person from any background can come and become a spiritual person. And you're supposed to leave your religion behind. Your religion was something of like a kindergarten, and you've now graduated to spirituality, where religion is, it teaches you about God. Spirituality lets you experience and have a relationship with the divinity within you. And so anybody coming into the Sajmark system has to leave their religion and their religious prejudice behind. But the piece of shit that is the current master of the system, Kamesh Patel, ends up going with this group called RSS, which is a pro-Hindi, anti-Muslim group. It's a paramilitary group, and they train with like broomsticks and shit, kind of goofy. But there was 10,000s of them marching on the street, and this guy embraced the pro-Hindu energy in the country because the majority of people are Hindu. And I like this guy in terms of my ability to get a visa. Like this guy helped me, travel to India because he's pro-American and progress, but he's anti-Muslim, which is a fucked up thing because the Hindu culture is, it recognizes Jesus, recognizes Buddha, recognizes Muhammad. The Hindu culture, there isn't just one saint. Anybody's a potential saint. It's one of the best things about that religion. But this prick is anti-Muslim, and he's nodding his head when Trump says that. And that's significant, right? Because, they're fraudulent. These are frauds, right?
To confront the threat of radical Islamic terrorism, a threat all over the world, actually. Today, I'm pleased to announce that my administration has approved the extradition of one of the plotters and one of the very evil people of the world, and having to do with the horrific 2008 Mumbai terrorist attack, to face justice.
So that was done by an American. I don't know if this is that guy, but there was an ex-CIA guy who was he was still in the CIA that administered this. If you watch, there's a movie called Hotel Mumbai or something like that, and it was about this event. And the way that it played out, like when I went to a mall, we would take cabs, we'd take rickshaws or cabs to the mall, and we were being dropped off, or if you were parking, they were parking in the garage, they would put a big mirror underneath the car to see if there was a bomb. Like this was like how it looked like a giant, those mirrors they put in your mouth at the dentist. Like they don't use them anymore, but those mirrors to look at your teeth. And they had the giant one of those they put under the car, and then you have to go through metal detectors going into the mall. There's all this security because of that event. And because of that event, you can only, if as a tourist, as a someone on a visa, you could only get a 3-month SIM card, even though your visa could be 6 months. So, it was like that. And so, but it was an American thing. It was American intelligence that was behind these so-called Pakistani people that came in and just murdered all these people in Mumbai. It used to be Bombay, right? They changed the names. These were English names that they changed back to the original name. Like Chennai was Madras, and I forgot what Calcutta was, but they've changed all these names back to the original Indian names because they were British names.
Justice in India, so he's going to be going back to India to face justice as we deepen our defense partnership will also strengthen our economic ties and bring greater fairness and reciprocity to our trading relationship. As a signal of good faith, Prime Minister Modi recently announced the reductions to India's unfair, very strong tariffs that limit U.S. access into the Indian market very strongly. And really, it's a big problem, I must say. India imposes a 30 to 40 to 60 and even 70% tariff on so many of the goods, and in some cases far more than that. And as an example, a 70% tariff on U.S. cars going into India, which makes it pretty much impossible to sell those cars. Today, the U.S. Trade deficit with India is almost $100 billion, and Prime Minister Modi and I have agreed that we'll begin negotiations to address the long-running disparities that should have been taken care of over the last 4 years, but they didn't do that.
He always finds a way to shit on Joe Biden.
U.S.-India trading relationship with the goal of signing an agreement, and we want a certain level playing field, which we really think we're entitled to, and he does also, in fairness. So we're going to work on that very hard, and we can make up the difference very easily with the deficit, with the sale of oil and gas, LNG, of which we have more than anybody in the world. The Prime Minister and I also reached an important agreement on energy that will restore the United States as a leading supplier of oil and gas to India. It will be hopefully their number one supplier. And the groundbreaking development for U.S. nuclear industry. India is also reforming its laws to welcome U.S. nuclear technology, which is at the highest level, into the Indian market. This will bring safe, clean, and affordable electricity to millions of Indians and tens of billions of dollars to the U.S. civilian nuclear industry in India. And under the framework we are announcing today, the United States and India are also joining forces to ensure that artificial intelligence and other advanced technologies.
Okay, so I want to address this because it sounds like a good thing, right? That trade is opening up, and America will have more manufacturing and be able to sell more of our stuff to India, and the stuff with the energy. But the most important thing at this point is not to fuck the environment up any more than it already is, because people are miserable. The condition of humanity is deplorable. People suck, and we're not even happy about. You go to the richest people, and they're like the most unhappy people, and like, how is that possible? People who have all the material goods and have all the comforts. It seems like the richer you are, the more miserable you are. It's like an invertendo thing. This the whole stuff about being fraudulent, because people are so disconnected from their internal connection to divinity within them, and people have such loveless lives. They don't have the capacity to love. They're pleasure-based. People are pleasure-based, but that pleasure runs out, and physical pleasure is not a substitute for, love and family and all the things, right? The hard stuff that's there to be in a functional relationship. Things that are just pleasurable, things that are just, just a good time. There's a difference between being with a prostitute or being with your wife, right? Being with a wife is much more difficult. You pay a prostitute some money, something like this. It's these relationships that are, some sort of, what do you call it? They're an exchange, right? They're sometimes transactional relationships, whereas, love relationships are so much more. And, like I was talking about marriages failing in the beginning. And so, the misery that people, the misery that is humanity right now, like most people are, fundamentally unhappy on one level or another. And taking more resources and having more shit, it's now been, if you look at this as an experiment, all the stuff that we have, all the advantages we have of technological development has made us worse. It's made us more entitled. It's made us weaker. It's made us more dependent. It's made us just into bad people. We see the kids growing up today. The internet and, all the stuff that kids are involved in, having these cyber lives, IRL, in real life, They have mostly cyber lives. Are they happy? These kids, they're 60% depressed. They're on medication, suicidal. And so the more technologically advanced we've gotten, the more this technology has hurt us and turned us into worse versions of ourselves, like where we would be if we didn't have these things. People who have more primitive technology were better people, more functioning people. They had more strength, more better character qualities, just all these things, like I was saying before in the beginning of the video. And so it's played out. So why fuck the earth up more with taking resources and turning it into toxic pollution? There's a time where India was we were paying them to take our nuclear waste. I was talking to some Indian guy was in India, some guy who was an ex-military, and he read this and he was like, I can't believe we're taking America's toxic waste. Like that we're that bad of a country that we're willing to take something. That stuff that's radioactive half-lives for 1 billion years. They're screwing their country over. They have their own nuclear technology. And now they're going to have more of that shit, these nuclear plants, which are all, they're disasters waiting to happen. And so, all this stuff sounds good, but it isn't. Like, this is what I'm talking about, fraudulent. And we just know these guys, they're lying pieces of shit. This guy went to they went to the Heartfulness, one of the, went to the ashram there to get votes or whatever. He pretends to be spiritual, but, this is not spirituality. This is, fraud. They're frauds. Okay, so YouTube recommended this to me. I don't know how much of this I can use. It's from I Am Celine Dion documentary. Nobody likes to talk about herself in the third person more than this original ghoul. Remember, I was like, when I started using the word ghoul, it was her and Pete Davidson that were my inspiration.
Celine Dion is the one who sang
Who is this Celine Dion that you speak of?
All by Myself Anymore to the highest note ever. And
highest note, the best. She's like the Donald Trump of, when she talks about herself, right? The way Donald Trump's always, he's the greatest and the best, and we are the, Okay, so they copyrighted this from her video where she's hitting this horrible note all by myself. The song All By Myself. That's what she's singing it. And I don't know if I have to take this whole clip out. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But I'll give it another try here. Look at her go. Go do it, Celine. You got it. Sing it, Celine. You got it, Celine. Celine Dion.
she's the best.
She's the best. So here she starts crying because she can't sing it because, she's turned into a full ghoul. She starts wild. She starts crying here, and so I have to edit this out. Sing it. 2016, she couldn't do it.
I think I was very good.
I think I was very good. You guys might not know that about me, but I think I was pretty good.
I think I hit some stuff that was amazing.
She had some stuff that was amazing, but now she has stiff person syndrome, a.k.a. she's a ghoul.
But there's been moments where I had to go to the studio and I knew they wanted Celine Dion.
I mean, that's the paycheck was to Celine Dion, so they knew they wanted her.
Who's Celine Dion?
Who is Celine Dion? Who is this Celine Dion that you speak of?
When I try to breathe, my lungs are fine. It's what's in front of my lungs that's so rigid because of stiff person syndrome that it's like...
A.k.a. being a ghoul.
It's like, I know you. That's what happened.
Okay, so I originally started to cover her because she did this thing called New, which was filled with this Illuminati demonic and just depressing genderless clothing that she produced. And she did this really horrible commercial with babies. It was just gross. And, like she became like a, one of these devil worshipping pieces of crap like this, pushing this darkness on children. And then the ghoul thing happened. But she's just so obnoxious, right? And it's just so fraudulent. Like she's somebody who's obviously so narcissistic, but pretends to be something else, right? I mean, they're all frauds. Like this is something that I cover here is just frauds. People acting and being who they're not, right? Pretending to be something you're not, right? And it's just, it's totally avoidable because, if you're pretending to be something you're not, then you're admitting you're a piece of shit, right? You're admitting what you are is not okay. So why not just do that? Like just say, I'm not great. Like I need to be better. I mean, at least to yourself. And this is what I'm talking about. People who believe their own lies. People who believe their own bullshit. Trump, when he gets called on this bullshit, and he knows it's bullshit, but he gets called on it, he gets offended. People who get called on their stuff that they're shilling for, they're pitching, and they know they're lying, and then and yet when somebody catches them lying or shows them they're lying, they get pissed off, right? This apple cider vinegar is a great example of that. Like you're not great, Celine. You're just this imaginary greatness that you've created, and you think that that somehow people don't see through it. Arrested by ICE on February 9th, 2025, assault. I mean, I think this guy's innocent. I think he looks just so like an upstanding citizen.
Now, before I take questions, I would like to address an extremely dishonest narrative that we've seen emerging over the past few days. Many outlets in this room have been fear-mongering the American people into believing...
Okay, so you haven't fear-mongered? Trump didn't fear-monger about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. He didn't fear-monger when he said they're eating the dogs in Springfield, Ohio. He didn't fear-monger about the immigration problem. He didn't make shit up. J.D. Vance didn't fact-check it and find out that it was bullshit, but he still fear-mongered and pretended it wasn't bullshit even though he knew it was. And you didn't support all these narratives. Trump is one of the biggest fear-mongers around, right? Like he just talks about these things and what a disaster it's going to be if the other guy wins and all these things, right? And, just a complete fraudulent bullshit. This again.
Believing there is a constitutional crisis taking place here at the White House. I've been hearing those words a lot lately. But in fact, the real constitutional crisis is taking place within our judicial branch, where district court judges in liberal districts across the country are abusing their power to unilaterally block President Trump's basic executive authority. We believe these judges...
It's the liberals again. It's liberals. I never thought it was going to come around to the liberals. You're not fear-mongering about the liberals right now, right? They're the ones who are doing the stuff that we're accusing us of.
Judges are acting as judicial activists rather than honest arbiters of the law. And they have issued at least 12 injunctions against this administration in the past 14 days, often without citing any evidence or grounds for their lawsuits.
So that's what this system's supposed to be, checks and balances. There's supposed to be checks and balances to power. The judicial branch and the legislative branch are supposed to check the executive branch and vice versa. But that's not happening. Trump is going full Trump. He's getting very little resistance. He's getting to do all the things he wants to do. Some of the things will be blocked. And he's trying bold shit, right? Wide sweeping changes. And there should be some pushback.
This is part of a larger concerted effort by Democrat activists and nothing more than the continuation of the weaponization of justice against President Trump. Quick newsflash to these liberal judges who are supporting their obstructionist efforts. 77 million Americans voted to elect this president. And each injunction is an abuse of the rule of law and an attempt to thwart the will of the people.
Jesus Christ. A lot of people don't know what the fuck you're doing, and they didn't sign up for it. Like, just,
As the president clearly stated in the Oval Office yesterday, we will comply with the law in the courts, but we will also continue to seek every legal remedy to ultimately overturn these radical injunctions and ensure President Trump's policies can be enacted.
Boom. And they will be. And then we'll see. I want to talk more about fraud. I want to end this thing with some animal stuff. But first, I'm going to show you it snowed here. And this kind of is going to tie into this. And my chickens are in their house. I want to do a couple of videos I shot here. And then I want to get back to the theme here. Okay, so we got some snow here. This is running pretty well. The snow is unsuspected. I came out here with the dog last night. It's going to show it's going to take a video of the fish because the water was so clear. Because it rains a lot. I wanted to go to the big pond to see if it's... Away from the wind here. I wanted to go to the big pond to see if it was full, how full it was. They came out, I looked over the shade this morning, it's like frickin', we got a couple more inches of snow. Gotta go do the chickens' water. So this is the chickens here. We're missing a bunch. I don't know where they are. Holy shit. Only got, there's some under here. So I don't know. So this is their water. So someone had filled their water. I guess it was my wife. I thought it was empty, but she must have done that this morning. So there's a heating element in the bottom. It's plugged in here. And see, the water gets all dirty. You know, they get their food in there. So there's one chicken laying. So this is these great inventions. There'd be a ton of little birds in here, a lot of starlings. If it wasn't for that, a lot of chickens under here. They're all hanging out under here. It doesn't smell too bad in here. You know, it's a chicken house, but it's not great in general. There's chickens all under here. So they're not going outside today because of the snow. There's the chicken door. Chicken door was closed this morning, but they're more likely. You know, they don't really drink that water all that much, so we don't keep it filled. You know, if they come out here to drink. Anyways, there is one chicken's in here who's laying. This is frozen shut. So I got it. I don't know if she's the one that's laying. She might be laying. Yeah, it's starting to get more light out. They didn't lay for a couple months. We got one egg the other day. Anyways, that's what's up with the chickens. The problem with human beings, you know, and this idea of past lives and future lives and the dysfunction, is we've forgotten what we're supposed to be, what we are naturally. Because what we are naturally is, you know, we know what the truth is. We know what we're supposed to do. We know what our lifestyle is supposed to be. You know, there's levels of our functioning, you know, our animalistic tendencies, our intuition, using our senses, our connection with the natural world, you know, the Aboriginal people, you know, all the things that we've lost since we've domesticated ourselves, right? And, you know, with animals, you can tell they know still how to be animals. Like there's pets that, you know, wouldn't survive in the wild, right? There was this time, one of my buddies, he listens to my show once in a while, and he was dating this girl who was kind of, you know, high maintenance, and she, you know, was in college, and she was in the dorm. She's like on the 5th or 6th floor, and she got a pet rabbit. You know, we weren't supposed to have pets. It was one of these white rabbits with pink fucking eyes, you know, like these completely domesticated, not real fat, you know, just just sitting in a fucking cage, right? And he was tasked with going up, and I think the elevator wasn't working because most of the lights in the building were shut off because it was the summer and there was no one supposed to be there. And he'd have to go up there and take care of the rabbit. And he was, you know, he was taking care of his grandparents and he had jobs and, you know, he was busy, right? And, you know, it was a big hassle for something that shouldn't have been done. And I went up there and it was dark and I'm like, how is this thing, you know, this is horrible. It's like torture. These things sitting all alone in a dark room in a small little cage. And I'm like, you know what? Let's let this motherfucking thing free. Right? there's a park like across the road, right? I'm like, even if it dies, at least it'll die, you know. And so he was eager to do it, whatever, right? So we go over to the park and we open up the cage, and the thing doesn't want to leave. It's like hopping back in its cage. It's like scared shitless, because there's like, no chance this thing's going to survive in this small park in New Britain in a major city. No, but it's bright white. I mean, there's not even without predators, it has no chance. It's just, but and we kind of chased it off trying to get it, but just wouldn't go. Like it's just you could go up and pick it up. It was like completely domesticated, and so he tells his girlfriend that the rabbit was dead. That we went up there and the rabbit was dead, and we went to bury it in the park, or leave it in the park or whatever, and because he couldn't leave it up in the room because it would stink or whatever. And the thing was playing possum. He jumped up and ran off. And she said to him, "You mean two basketball players couldn't catch a sick rabbit?" But these domesticated animals that aren't living lives of any significance, right? But they still have their instincts. I threw out a big chunk of fat. We have some fat left over from when we processed the cows. So I chucked it outside so the chickens could eat it. And my dogs and I went for a walk, and Tulsi made a beeline, like it was on the other side of the house, and it was some distance. It was just, the chickens had eaten most of it. And she ran over and she smelled it, like she could smell it from a distance. Tulsi's walked by with 3 baby rabbits in her mouth. I mean, she's caught a number of mice. She's killed a bunch of different animals. Of course, cats are very good hunters, even domesticated. They can carve out a little living for themselves. They haven't totally forgot what they were when they originally, our papillons used to be foxes, and they still have a lot of fox-like behaviors. You can see these videos of nature videos of foxes tilting their heads to the side in snow, and if they're facing the north, they have some electromagnetic, frequency kind of thing going on, and they're able to pinpoint where these mice are underneath the snow, and they jump in the air and they dive in. And my papillons do that even without snow. They dive into the grass like that, and they tilt their heads to the side. Behaviors I've seen foxes exhibit, they still have, right? And that's their natural side. Of course, they're evolving, being around people. Their consciousness is expanding. Domesticated animals, like if you see a dairy cow, it has a higher level of consciousness than a beef cow, because the dairy cow is interacting with the farmers. Not these industrialized dairy cows, but if you have a family cow, it'll have a whole different level of consciousness because it's around people. All the animals that are around people, their consciousness expands because people have a broader consciousness. But but they know how to be what they are, right? They know what they're designed to be, and they become, they do that task. They fulfill their role in nature. But human beings are so forgotten what we're supposed to be, either in terms of our Aboriginal heritage, but also our spiritual essence. And we know what's right and wrong. We on a level of whatever's been perverted in our system and whether fucked up families we have and all that stuff. Deep down, people know what we're doing is wrong and what we should be doing. There's a sense in it. But people's egoism, this is the problem with humanity, as opposed to all the other creatures here. The other ones, maybe chimpanzees and dolphins and things, might flirt with this a little bit. But this idea of I do and I am, as opposed to being an extension of God, where I have the freedom, I did that. I created this. Me, I did this. And without divine essence, without your soul, without the part of you that's animating your physical existence, you can't do anything. And there's divine system. There's etheric assistance. There's etheric beings. There's a spiritual support system. And so as soon as we start to think about me, I did this separate from God. This is my creation. I created this. And people have built their own creations where they're not working aligned with their soul or God. And this is the problem with humanity. The illusionary world that each person builds inside themselves, that's a perverted version of reality. And that is the essence of the original fall. Adam eating the apple is in terms of the Christian, Jewish tradition, Judeo-Christian tradition. That idea of I am, I do. Before it was all aligned with what, you're part of the whole. Like the animals, they're not as sophisticated in their level of consciousness and their level of self-awareness, but they're able to perform their tasks that they're supposed to perform, whatever role they're supposed to play. And if nature deems that they're no longer useful, their species goes extinct and their soul goes into another form, hopefully a higher one. But with human beings, with the ability to choose and the ability to think that we're the doers, it's not God that does everything, that we're the doers. Well, it's me, I'm making it happen. I, Celine, I am Celine, this stuff. The egoism, that's what's fucked humanity. And that, the egoism's on full display. Trump is a huge person with me, I. A humble person, a person who's realizes they can't function without God's help. That without God, you can't take like I've said before, you can survive, some months without food. You can survive some days without water. You can survive some minutes without oxygen, without breathing. But you can't survive at all without God. As soon as the divine love is removed from your system, you die. So there's the soul, the energy, the divine energy that manifests your physical being. And people forget about that and, think that they're doing everything. And that, that leads to all the deception, all the fraud. That's the ultimate in the fraudulent understanding. Me, I did this, look at me, look at my accomplishment. And that without God, you're nothing. Because literally, you need God for your very existence. Anyways, let's wrap this one up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing for the apocalypse. And the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.